Hi, everyone. I'm PPLPLEASR. Well, that's my artist name anyway. And I dabble a little bit in the world of NFTs, DAOs, DeFi. And today I'm going to give you a little talk about, my career and just what I'm building in general. So I used to work in visual effects and feature animation and on the Blizzard cinematics team before jumping into making animations to promote DeFi protocols in summer of 2020. Is this clicker working? Yes, works. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning where my love for all things art and storytelling began. So I've loved drawing ever since as young as I can remember, and like many other kids of my generation, I grew up watching anime and Disney and Pixar movies. And just as story-eyed as WALL-E is on the screen here, my love for animation and good storytelling has reached new heights in college when I watched WALL-E for the first time and decided that this could actually be a career. And thus I taught myself how to make 3D animations, and I worked at various visual effects and animation studios and applied to Pixar like 20 times, never got the job, but still I wasn't satisfied. So it wasn't until I worked on the Diablo 4 cinematic and watched its premiere and the audience's reaction at BlizzCon in 2019 that I realized what I was really passionate about was not trying to work on the biggest Hollywood movie, but more importantly is how this art form and storytelling made people feel. So it didn't matter if it was 2 hours long or 30 seconds long, it just mattered if it made people feel something. And another thing I learned is that people love Easter eggs and symbolism, and so did I. And so flash forward to 2020 when I lost my job and I was casually browsing crypto Twitter, and during this time I realized there were so many interesting narratives and culture around crypto and DeFi, none of which were being told in the form of animation. So I saw this as an opportunity to create a job for myself, first of all, but also to use this as my canvas. And I made a bunch of short little 30-second animations with DeFi protocols, each telling its own story and never forgetting to include Easter eggs in each one. So during this time was when I discovered that I was essentially able to become like a director of, albeit very, very short little animations, and it sort of opened up my eyes to the freedom of creativity and storytelling. Now, last year in March, I made the infamous Uniswap v3 animation, and it tells the story of how Uniswap brought life to DeFi, and I filled the animation with a bunch of symbolism and Easter eggs of crypto, and I injected it with visual inspiration from anime, like the Art of Nobius, and then I auctioned it off as an NFT. And, well, I guess it must have made people feel something because it went very viral and sold for a lot of ETH. I can actually still remember the feeling of logging onto Twitter that day and reading everyone's comments and reactions to it, as if I was teleported right back to that room at BlizzCon with the audiences. Except that back then, they were just cheering for something I was a very small part of. And this time, they were cheering for something I directed. In fact, people were, I think, so motivated by this animation that I made that a bunch of people got together and created a DAO to bid on it. And they won the auction, and that was basically the genesis of Pleaser DAO, if people have heard of this DAO before. And they also kicked off an entire movement of crowdfunding and DAOs that year. So, prior to this, most auctions ended with one winning individual who changes value for the NFT itself. Now, what Pleaser DAO did was they essentially, what made this sale so special is that it was the first time that a group of individuals felt compelled enough to pull money together to bid on an NFT as a collective, so that they can all share ownership of the piece that they were bidding on. And in doing this, they needed to trust each other and establish structure on a blockchain, so they created a DAO. So, this conference seems pretty advanced, but just in case, I've prepared a slide explaining what a DAO is, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and is essentially a group organized around a mission that coordinates through a shared set of rules on the blockchain. So speaking of crowdfunding, my third drop that year was a series of NFTs that were used to crowdfund the Ethereum documentary, which is currently in production. The crowdfund was a huge success, and we raised over 1,000 ETH in 48 hours and inspired many others to crowdfund in a similar fashion. Now, this was pivotal because within 48 hours, the entire documentary had been funded. And so now, over a year later, they're still using those same funds to basically film the documentary. And if you were to do this in the more traditional fashion, like within Hollywood or things like that, just the process of funding the film alone would probably take like at least more than a year. So what happened after was I put the entirety of crypto Twitter on the cover of Fortune magazine and made Forbes 30 Under 30, collaborated with Steve Aoki, yada, yada, yada. I think you could say that it was a very, very eventful and lucky year for me, which has led many to ask me the question, what is the next thing that you're working on? So in the attention economy, where attention is the only scarce resource, I often think about how incredible it is that despite our busy lives and shortening attention spans, many of us still dedicate our undivided attention to watch longer form content, whether it's a music video, short film, movie, or TV series. The problem is that making this type of content is extremely expensive and time-consuming, and even I can't guarantee that they will all sell as one-of-ones as successfully as my Uniswap animation, for example. So currently, when you spend all this time, money, and effort into making a short film, the best you can do is either seek traditional ways of funding or just biting the bullet and funding it yourself and then throwing it out into the film festival circuit in the hopes that it gets picked up somewhere. So I'm always looking to innovate and push boundaries, and it definitely felt like the NFT market was sort of oversaturated with profile picture projects and short 4-second animation loops that people were selling as art. And so I was spending a lot of time thinking about this problem. And this is where the idea of Shibuya came to me. And it's a Web3 experiment where longer form content is free to watch, but it's monetized on the blockchain to incentivize further development as well as viewer participation. So Shibuya is basically the culmination of everything I've learned in my career thus far, from crowdfunding to monetizing engagement to empowering creators. It's basically a decentralized video platform that hopes to change the way that films and longer form content is funded and created. Now, it's named after the crossing in Tokyo, and the concept is that Shibuya is a place where people can come and watch all kinds of different content for free, but if you want to decide what goes on the screens, you have to pay. Now, in order for this to work, the content itself must also be really good. And in my mind, there was only one person that I would want to collaborate with, and that is Maciej Kuciara. That's how you pronounce his name. And he's a renowned digital artist and director and has produced concept art for the Last of Us game series, the Avengers movies series, and live-action Ghost in the Shell. So having been a longtime admirer of his work also largely influenced and inspired my own. And luckily for me, he was crazy enough to be into the idea, and thus we began building the vision that is Shibuya. Now, the first film or series that we are launching on Shibuya is called White Rabbit, and it's an interactive Web3 series that tells the tale of going down the crypto rabbit hole, an experience that many of us are so familiar with. It's metaphorical, of course, so as a person who doesn't understand crypto, you might think you're just watching a regular animated film. Now, it pays homage to many themes in our industry, and it's full of Easter eggs, if you know where to look. And it's basically like anime meets Black Mirror meets Love, Death, and Robots meets crypto. So the concept is simple. The pilot episode will come to a point where the main character is faced with two choices. Now, behind each door is an alternate ending to the episode. In order to watch one, you have to vote. So the viewer will be able to mint with what we're calling producer passes, which are NFTs that you can stake to cast your vote. The act of purchasing this NFT simultaneously funds the production of the animation, while the act of voting will help to shape the general direction of the story. So After you stake your producer pass, you are rewarded with some RAB token, which are fractional ownership tokens of the final film or series. Then you can continue watching the alternate ending that you picked. And here's where it gets a little bit technical for the technical people in the audience. The RAB tokens are distributed on a bonding curve. So for example, somebody who participates in episode 1 will be rewarded more tokens than somebody who participates in a later episode. And on an episodic scale, to incentivize early voting, somebody who votes at an earlier time will also get somebody who votes at a later time within the same episode. So voting will conclude when the reserve pool of fractional tokens of that episode are sufficiently distributed, meaning a certain level of engagement of that episode has been met. And when voting concludes, everyone will unstake their producer passes and then get those NFTs back into their wallet, and they can keep it as a souvenir. The design of the producer passes for White Rabbit are inspired by traditional Japanese woodblock prints, and there will be a different one for each episode. So the idea is for them to be more like movie ticket stubs, where there can also be a paper trail in your wallet of all the episodes that you participated in, and can be useful in the future for people to seek out tastemakers. So far, we've made 3 chapters totaling around 7 minutes of animation, and we raised around $1.4 million US for the first 2 chapters. Now, that's not bad for a self-initiated project in animation. Something cool, something cool, sorry, can we go back to the previous slide? Thank you. So something cool that we built for this project is the dynamic film credits at the end, which everybody who contributed to financing and participating in the film is credited with a producer credit. Now, in the order in which they appear on the credits is always updating live based on the amount of engagement tokens that they have in their wallet. So this is the first example of giving value and utility to an otherwise valueless governance token, which is the RAB token. So how do you coordinate people when nobody knows each other and nobody trusts each other? Well, we're unifying a community of people through a film project on the blockchain. So we're trying to do something that engages community to be involved and invested in the project direction, but are also rewarded for participating beyond just being entertained. You can rally your friends to affect voting in a certain way that you favor, and there may be many different ways to gamify the voting mechanics and how it will affect the plot. And each creator within the Shibuya ecosystem can come up with their own ways to do this. In fact, IPs don't necessarily have to adopt a choose-your-own-adventure model, and it can be purely linear and episodic as well. So April was a big month for Shibuya. Our main character, Mirai, was on the cover of Vogue Taiwan. And the White Rabbit trailer played around Shibuya Crossing on all the screens there, which was pretty cool to see. And to round off this year, we just announced our seed round, led by A16Z and Variant, as well as notable angel investors like Kevin Durant, Paris Hilton, Joe Tsai, and Stani from Aave. So together, we are building Shibuya. It's a place basically where cultures and ideas can meet in one eclectic and inspiring place. And it's IPs built by creatives and artists that empower them to freely create their vision without having to wait for anybody in Hollywood to say yes to them. And with the support of their fans, they can bypass complex and often impossible ways of funding film projects traditionally. So last but not least, I'm gonna show you guys a trailer of Chapter 3, and this has actually, this is the first time that I'm showing this to anybody, so please don't record. Thanks.
この場所は私たちがここで生きていけるようになる前に消えてしまう。本当に全てが消えるのを阻止できるの？ 「
right, let's give it up for People Pleaser.